All right, rolling. Hi there, and thank you so much for clicking on this video. So this video is a continuation of another video I made where I pitched a Pokemon game concept that I think would be really fun to play. And how this concept came about is a little funny. So a few weeks ago, I got into reading fan fiction. But more specifically, I got into reading fan fiction that ChatGPT wrote for me. But more specifically, I got into reading fan fiction of the Pokemon games that I asked ChatGPT to write for me. And through that exploration, I started developing a really cool game concept with ChatGPT. And in that video that I mentioned before, I kind of gave a brief outline of what I would like that game to be. In this video, I'm going more into detail because over the past 2 weeks, I just got very into writing this world. So, if I were to name this Pokemon game, I would call it Pokemon Order and Chaos. And here's the concept. Basically, you have two timelines. You have the past timeline and you have the present timeline. Now, this isn't the first time the Pokemon Company and Game Freak has explored time travel. I mean, you have legendary Pokemon like Celebi, and then you have games like Arceus. But nonetheless, I still think that this would be a cool concept to explore. So here is the main story of this game. You, the protagonist, do not have parents. And I think this is a really interesting setup because, one, most of the Pokemon games that you play, you're usually greeted by your parents. And I think in setting up that you do not have parents, it subverts the player's expectations. It subtly tells the player that this game is going to be a little different. This game is going to be a little darker. So, due to some divine legendary Pokemon intervention, the timeline split into the past and the present. And you were given the opportunity to traverse back and forth between them and solve the mystery of what happened to your parents. Now, your parents have a very, very interesting story. So, where do I even begin with this? So your parents are the human reincarnations of the legendary Pokemon of this game. Are you still with me? So here's the backstory. Long ago, before time was measured itself, before there were even Pokemon, they were two celestial beings that shaped the flow of time and existence. And they were never meant to intertwine with each other. And yet, they remained drawn to one another by a force deeper than fate itself. But to remain as divine entities meant that they had to remain apart. They were bound to their role shaping the world, but never truly living within it. So to escape this endless cycle, they made a choice. They decided to seal their divine powers into these two items, which we'll get into. That way, they can shed their celestial forms, and in doing so, they hope that one day they will meet as two souls, simply existing side by side. All right, so I need you to stay with me here. So they separated their soul with their divine power. By doing so, their souls are able to traverse time, and that's how they were able to be reincarnated as your parents in the past timeline. Now, let's talk about their divine power. So, as I mentioned before, their powers have been sealed into these items. And in the game, these items are called heirlooms. We have Soren's Pearl, which holds Soren's power, and then Zalen's Pearl, which holds Zalen's power. So basically how I envision these pearls is that they're actually very ancient forms of Master Balls. And by activating them, you basically activate their power. And when you activate their power, they transform into the physical embodiment of that power, which is the Pokemon. So when your character traverses back into the past timeline, you not only have this opportunity to uncover this mystery of your parents, which is that they are legendary Pokemon reincarnate, but you also have this opportunity to uncover this beautiful love story. And not just the celestial part of their love story, but their love story as humans. So I think it's important to note that your human form parents do not know that they are legendary Pokemon reincarnate. As far as they know, your mother, who we'll call Seiran, is a dark type gym leader, and your father, who we'll call Rui, is a fairy type gym leader. And if you want to learn more about their characters and what I've fleshed out so far, you can click on my previous 2 videos, which I'll link down below. So a game mechanic that I really want to have more present in this game is more dialogue and choice options. And Pokemon has done that in previous games, but I want even more. And the reason being is because, 1, I want the story to mostly unravel through character interactions, through dialogue. And number 2, I want the player to feel like they are able to affect change in this game. So depending on what they choose, maybe they can have some sort of influence in the future outcome. Perhaps they can influence whether their parents exist in the present timeline or not. Now, let's get into some more lore. This story actually occurs well before Seiran and Rui were reincarnated as their human selves. But the story is important to how they eventually find out that they are Pokemon reincarnate. So long ago, the heirlooms, the pearls, were entrusted and protected by a prominent family in the region. And this family is actually related to one of the gym leader characters that I'll eventually talk about at some point. Anyway, they have a shrine where these pearls are well guarded, but they were eventually stolen, and the person that stole them is actually an ancestor of Rui's family. I know, it's really ironic and it's really tragic. So Rui's ancestor believed that she could wield the powers of the pearls and reshape the world at her will. And the reason why she did that is a little bit more complex than how I'm describing it now. I'm still fleshing out this story, but I kind of want it to be a love story in itself. Perhaps she felt that if she had the powers of Soren and Ceylon, she can control time and she can move backwards and perhaps save someone that she cared about deeply. Again, ironic and tragic. So, eventually the dormant forces of Soren and Ceylon were unleashed. And this resulted in chaos that was threatening to unravel time itself. Then, a true hero emerged whose name has been lost in time. And in the confrontation between this hero and Rui's ancestor, the pearls were shattered, resulting into fragments. And these fragments were carried and scattered across time. So I haven't exactly fleshed out how or why these pearls were fragmented, but the general gist is that Soren and Ceylon felt that if they scattered their power across time, then less people will have access to their power, and events like this will happen less frequently. And it kind of ensures that their divine powers will always be separated from their souls, allowing their souls to constantly and continuously meet throughout time. So in collecting the pearl fragments, it gives your character this incentive to collect all of it and piece these pearls together, because they seem to uncover the mystery of your parents to some capacity or shape. And again, your objective is to find out that mystery and hopefully maybe make some change so that they can exist with you in the future. All right, let's talk about the villains of this story. Actually, it's an organization. And you guessed it, this organization functions very much like Team Rocket. This is the Team Rocket of the game. So you know how I mentioned that Rui's ancestor was deemed the hero of the region? Basically, that led to his family to become pretty prominent and have really distinguished roles throughout history. Rui's father is actually the headmaster of the Pokemon Academy. And this is kind of a problem because he uses his position to basically carry out really unethical Pokemon practices. Don't ask me what they are, they're just unethical. And I have this really interesting character in mind where maybe they're kind of a snoop, maybe they're like a journalist. And they know that Rui's family has always been up to no good, but no one really believes them. And their whole thing is trying to uncover these unethical practices, but due to money and influence, they're never ever quite close to doing it. So maybe a side quest that we can explore is you helping this character. Hopefully I'll flesh them out at some point. I think it could be really fun. So Rui has never seen eye to eye with his family. He has no intention in carrying out their family business or even upholding their family legacy. And if you remember in my previous videos where I briefly talked about his character, he was seen as a prodigy, the very best that no one ever was right off the bat. And I think that led to his family having really high expectations on him. And that in combination to his apathy towards what they're doing really caused a rift in him. This rift was so big that he decided to just shift to the other side of the spectrum and become the chaos magician that we know him to be today. And that is also aligned with his legendary Pokemon, which is the legendary Pokemon of Chaos. And if you remember from my analysis, his chaos doesn't necessarily come from the way that he outwardly acts. His persona is that he's very carefree, unpredictable, kind of nonsensical, but his chaos actually stems from his internal turmoil, his emotions. And that is one of the things that triggers these events coming up. So an important thing about Rui is that his whole arc is centered on understanding his emotions. At the beginning of the game, he is so afraid of them. He won't let you know, but he is deeply concerned that his emotions might hurt him and those around him. He's at least that emotionally intelligent, but instead of dealing with them, he decides to suppress them. And at the climax of this story is him confronting those emotions for the first time. It's ugly and it's messy and it might destroy the world. So just to briefly recap, remember that your character's objective is to figure out the mystery of your parents. And maybe if you figure it out, you can actually bring your parents back to exist in the present timeline. Now, your character is under the impression throughout the game that if they put together Soren and Zaylen's Pearl, they might be able to solve that mystery. And on top of that, maybe if they wield that power, they might have the power to bring their parents back. So this is when things get interesting. I haven't fleshed out this part entirely, so bear with me, but here are the bare bones. After you put together Soren and Zaylen's Pearl actually gets stolen. And the person who steals it is actually Rui. Now, his motivations I haven't decided yet, but I think this is the gist. Perhaps Rui hears about a plan that his family is trying to enact. So he decides to steal the pearl, and his plan is to destroy it. because one, his inclination is to destroy it, and perhaps this is a greater metaphor for something larger. Ryui is Seiden, and Ryui can't help but feel this internal hatred for himself. So perhaps subconsciously, he feels like he needs to destroy Seiden's pearl because it's actually a metaphor for him destroying himself. So at the final confrontation, you see Ryui going through it. He has finally transformed into his legendary form, Seiden. And chaos is ensuing, time is unraveling, and who is there to help you? Your mother, of course. So Seiran appears and she activates the power of Soren's pearl, and she becomes Soren. So you have this legendary Pokemon battle where you and your mom are fighting your dad, and eventually you are able to quell Ryui. You quell Seiden, and for the first time, Ryui is able to confront his chaos, his inner turmoil, his emotions. And I want to say that's the end of his character arc, but for many of us, that's usually the beginning. So there's another realization that happens during this battle. You realizing that Seiran and Ryui are your parents, you make the connection that they are basically chaos and order incarnate, which means that you are the child of chaos and order, which means your role in this whole story has always been about balance. So remember how the celestial beings basically strip their powers away from their souls, or whatever you want to call them? You might actually have a pearl as well. Perhaps your power of balance is what allows you to travel throughout time. And perhaps the unnamed hero from long, long ago that actually quelled Soren and Seiden, not Ryui's ancestor, was you. Perhaps that was your parents subconsciously calling you all those years ago. And once again, they have called you again. So now that you have solved the mystery of your parents and you have quelled the legendary Pokemon, you realize that you have fulfilled your duty in the past timeline, and there is no need for you to continue existing in this timeline. Therefore, it's time for you to go back to the present timeline permanently. Now, if you watched my first video, you might recall that I came up with this tagline for this game. So, in the English franchise, the tagline is, "Gotta catch 'em all." And for this game, I thought it would be cool if the tagline was, "I'll catch up to you." So, how I use this phrase between the characters is that it's a subtle way of them telling each other that one day they will see each other again. It's a promise. So, you return back to the present timeline, feeling like you completed your mission. And yet, you don't see your parents anywhere. Things are as they were, and you're wondering why that is. So basically, what I'm trying to tell the players of this game is that sometimes we can't change the present. Even if we were given the ability to change the past, perhaps some things are fixed. And perhaps you did catch up to your parents in a very funny way. Perhaps you going back into the past timeline was always meant to be. You were always meant to meet your parents back then and help them. And the relationship that you had was the relationship that you always wanted anyway. So in that sense, you did catch up. And in that sense, you were always together. And that is the message that I would want to have in a Pokemon game. So you might be wondering, well, why don't my parents exist in the current timeline with me? And I have a few ideas surrounding this. Could be that maybe the game leaves it ambiguous. Maybe the game doesn't exactly tell you. So in that sense, you're kind of left in the same spot as the beginning of the game. And if that's the case, the reason why they're not there might not even matter. Maybe this is all part of the grieving process. We're always so concerned over the why, but even when we get an answer, which we do in the game, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change things. What actually matters is, how do our emotions change? How do we confront those emotions? So that's an idea. Another idea is perhaps your parents being the embodiment of chaos and order, and you being the child that represents balance. Perhaps in some ways they found a union in your existence, and perhaps they decide to just return as legendary Pokemon or celestial beings destined to protect all of time and space. And when they need you, they know that they can call on you. And similarly, perhaps whenever you need them, you can call on them as well. No matter what, even if you can't see your parents, perhaps deep down you know that they will always be there for you through time and space. And perhaps that time and space is within our memories. I think it would be really nice if somewhere in the game you took a picture of you and your parents in the past timeline, and you find that photo again in the present timeline. And maybe there's a note. And maybe that note says something cheesy like this: if the wind ever feels like it's guiding you, or the moon seems brighter one night, know that we are with you always. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video and hearing me flesh out ideas of this game. I don't know if I will make this game or not. I'm actually playing around with maybe making a ROM hack. If you are someone that likes to make ROM hacks, or you're into game development, or maybe you have connections to the Pokemon Company and Game Freak and you're willing to pitch this game out there to them, then please let me know. Leave a message. I would love to stay connected. Anyway, if I think of any more ideas, I'll be sure to share. See you in the next video.